Sociologists use three main dimensions to measure class. These include financial assets, which is probably the one you would expect the most, education, and occupation. Now, we're going to spend the most time talking about financial assets. Occupation's a little bit harder to discuss because it's so categorical. But I want to take a moment to address education. This is what educational attainment looks like across the U.S. Now, a few notes before I get into some of the components of this graph. The data here come from 2015 census data, and specifically when the Census Bureau asks about educational attainment, they present data for those who are aged 25 and over. And if you're thinking 25 seems like an odd number, why would we not do it for everyone, or why not for all adults? Well, consider some of the things that are on here. For college degrees or advanced degrees, if you're 18 years old, you haven't even had a chance to attain those for the most part. Most people are just starting college at the age of 18. And if we include children, well then clearly we're going to have plenty of people who don't have a high school diploma. But by the age of 25, though people do continue to advance their education after this age, most people have attained a certain stability in their educational trajectory. By 25, it's even conceivable that people could have attained advanced degrees by this point if they continued straight into college and some sort of graduate school after high school. So as a simple way of understanding this, consider that we're trying to exclude people who have not had the opportunity yet to attain a particular level of education. So this graph and the next graph that I'll show you are for those who are age 25 and above, those who have less than a high school diploma, those who have a high school diploma or have completed a GED equivalent, those who have completed some college but not attained a bachelor's degree, and this is everything from one semester of college up to almost finished but not quite done. Those who have attained a bachelor's degree, and those who have some sort of advanced degree, which could be a master's degree, a doctorate, a law degree, or something else along those lines beyond the level of a bachelor's degree. Note that a third of the population has a bachelor's degree or higher. So that would include those with a bachelor's degree and with an advanced degree, because obviously you have to have the bachelor's degree to be able to go on to the advanced degree. So only a third of the population has a bachelor's degree or above. And note as well that over an eighth of the population of the U.S. does not even have a high school diploma. If that's surprising to you, it should be, considering that we are a nation with compulsory education. One would think that if we have compulsory education, nearly everyone would at least have a high school diploma, and yet we do not. So already we can see some interesting factors just along the dimension of education related to class inequality in the U.S. Let's compare the U.S. with Tennessee. So I've taken away the labels, but the color coding and the order are still the same as they were in the last slide. We can see here on the left is the same distribution for the U.S., and on the right is the distribution of educational attainment for the state of Tennessee. And if we look closely comparing across this, on the whole, we can see that Tennessee's educational attainment is lower than the national average. We have slightly more people who have not even finished high school, and we have slightly fewer people who have attained a bachelor's degree or an advanced degree of some sort. Tennessee, in fact, ranks 39th in the nation in terms of high school attainment, and 41st in the nation for the attainment of a bachelor's degree. Which brings me to the question for the day for you to look up before next class. Before next class, turn to the internet with a simple search. You could even copy and paste this question: which state ranks highest by the attainment of a bachelor's degree? I'll give you a hint. Wikipedia might be, in this case, a useful resource for you to check out. But more commonly than education, one of the things that we tend to turn to much more readily for thinking about class dynamics and class status is financial assets. And financial assets refers to a really big arena that we can break down into two types. One of those is income. And we can define income as a consumption and savings opportunity in monetary terms gained by an entity within a specified time frame. Now that entity could be an individual, that entity could be an organization, but that entity is gaining some kind of monetary assets within a specified time frame. That specified time frame is also very important. So we might think about salary, we might think about wages, we might think about the amount of money that a business makes each quarter, but income is basically money that comes in over time. Or a more simple way to look at this, more informally, we might think about income as money earned through employment and investments. That as individuals, we seek employment, and as mentioned a moment ago, we earn a salary or we earn wages, but whatever the rate is, we are earning an amount of money over a given amount of time. And both individuals and organizations can invest in things, and ideally, if you invest wisely, you get a return on that investment, and you get that return on investment over a specified time period. So income is one common form of financial asset. The other major form of financial asset is called wealth. Wealth refers to a host of valuable resources and material possessions, such as real estate, stocks and bonds, money, valuable gems and metals, or the control of such assets. Now, this, of course, is a very formal definition, similar to the first definition I gave for income, but if you're trying to figure out a simple way to understand the distinction between wealth and income, it is the difference between stocks and flows. A simple example might be to think about bodies of water, that the two general types of bodies of water that we find are, at least if we avoid the ocean altogether, are rivers and lakes. Income is very similar to a river. It is flowing. It is constantly moving past us. So we can look at how much money moves past a particular point in a given time period, just as we can look at how much water moved past a given point in the river at a given time period. Whereas wealth is much more like a lake. It is about the amount of water within a given space, and it doesn't really change over time, or at least yes, I know technically it does, but it's not supposed to. Wealth is similar. It's about how much money have you accumulated. You can sit on wealth. You can't just sit on income, but income could flow into wealth if it doesn't have to get diverted to other needs. Another distinction we might make between income and wealth is inheritable. In fact, wealth is often tied to family background because we are able to pass on wealth from one generation to the next. You can't really do that with income. Sure, you might have a family-owned business that you pass on to your kids, but that's not the same thing as passing on income. The amount of income that you make is, again, specified within a particular time frame. But wealth is inheritable. It can be passed on from generation to generation. Now, in a way, all of these dimensions refer to different kinds of capital. So whether we're talking about finances or education or even to a degree occupation, we are talking about different kinds of capital. Capital is a term that we often link to money, but in a very general sense, capital refers to a resource that can be used to leverage against other things that one wants or needs. So if I have a resource that I can use to acquire or attain something else that I want or need in life, that resource that I'm using is capital. I am leveraging that to get something else. And again, we most commonly think of capital in terms of economic capital. So economic capital refers very explicitly to our financial assets, to our money. If I have $5 and I want to go to Starbucks to buy a latte, I guess I'm getting a small latte, but I can leverage that by handing that over, and in exchange, I get the latte. That's a very simple example of the use of economic capital. But there are plenty other kinds of capital that exist too. One of those types is what we refer to as human capital. So human capital refers to one's innate abilities, or one's what we might call natural abilities. I know the word natural is not something we use much in sociology, but it does fit here. And so these might be things like strength or intelligence. And certainly, strength and intelligence are things that we can build upon. We can do things to increase our strength or perhaps increase our intelligence. But the point being that with human capital, we are talking about things that are very individualistic in nature. These are about things that individual human beings have a certain amount of or don't, and can, in certain situations, be leveraged so as to acquire other kinds of things. Another thing we can consider is social capital. So social capital refers to the relationships and connections that you can draw upon to accomplish your goals. So this would include things like families, friends, and the kinds of associations that you have connecting with other people. If you've ever heard the advice, it's not what you know, but who you know, that advice is referring to social capital. And while that's not universally true, there are ways in which it is true that the kinds of connections that you have that you can leverage for acquiring other things, to the degree you can do that, you are drawing upon social capital. So a very simple example might be if a friend tells you about a job opening that they know of, and that helps you to at least know to apply for it, or perhaps even to get a leg up. That is drawing upon social capital. So it's about the resources that you have through social connections with others. And then a final form of capital we often talk about is referred to as cultural capital. Cultural capital is kind of one of the most complex ones, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it in this class, but generally speaking, cultural capital refers to having appropriate knowledge to gain entry to certain situations or to move ahead in some way. Education itself is often a prime example of this, that the more that you know about things and the more that you know about different kinds of situations and how to interact and behave in certain situations can open up certain kinds of avenues for you. Or conversely, not knowing appropriate ways to behave or interact, or not having certain kinds of awareness might perhaps close off doors to you. But this is the ability to leverage the kinds of knowledge that you have in a variety of different arenas, from factual knowledge all the way to understanding artistic merits of certain things and how to appropriately dress or how to appropriately talk. These are examples of cultural capital. Now, these different forms of capital are not evenly distributed, and we call this unequal distribution stratification. We might formally define stratification as differential access to property or influence or status. And that brings us to our next class. In our next class, we will take some time to look at the distribution of financial assets in more detail. We will also spend some time talking about that all-important category, the middle class. What exactly is the middle class? Stay tuned, because that's what we're going to be unpacking in detail in class. And don't forget, before you come to our next class, if you haven't already, find out your family's annual household income before you get there. We're going to be comparing ourselves to the national average, and you'll have much better traction in doing so if you know where you and your family sit in the grand scheme of things. Otherwise, it's going to feel a little bit disconnected and nebulous for you.